What bugs Nia? Nia was the kind of person most people would describe as a helper. She was always fixing things, helping with chores and trying to keep others out of trouble, which often got her into trouble herself. She was tall, strong, and built to lift heavy things. She was not especially girly, yet she still loved girly things. She defended the weak and loved fun, but the one thing that truly bugged her were bugs. Any insect could make her run like a mouse that had spotted a lion. She was easily spooked by every creeping, crawling thing. No clever, encouraging words could convince her that she was much bigger than the little spider on the ceiling. To outsiders, she looked like a giant compared with such tiny creatures, but Nia saw herself as prey standing before a predator. So, although she loved summer and everything that came with it, she dreaded the arrival of insects. On the other side, the Crawleys had heard of the fearful giant Nia, and every summer they seemed to gang up to torment her. This summer was no different. The first warm days of summer had arrived, and with them came the buzzing, crawling, fluttering population of the neighborhood. Deep beneath a garden shed, inside a crack in the old wood, a meeting was being held. Dozens of insects squeezed into the tiny chamber, beetles polished their shells, ants marched in orderly lines, a pair of moths fluttered near a dusty lantern seed, spiders hung from silky threads in the corners, listening carefully. At the center stood Sia the fly. He rubbed his front legs together excitedly.
Wah, Ziatian is here,
announced Sia.
What is he talking about?
Asked Leo, a young ladybug, tilting his head.
He said, "Wow, summer is here,"
Mutia the mosquito clarified.
Oh, that's right, Leo replied. We should visit our friend Naya,
he said cheekily. Sia nearly fell over laughing.
A visit is not how I would describe what we are about to do.
The room erupted into chuckles.
Let's head to Nia's Fangzi,
Sia declared.
"What?"
asked a confused beetle.
"Nia's house,"
Mutia offered.
"Oh yeah," said the beetle. "Let's do this."
A spider descended from the ceiling. I heard she screamed when she saw my cousin last year.
"Only screamed?" said Mutia. She jumped onto a chair, knocked over a lamp, and ran into another room.
The insects roared with laughter. An elderly ant, Abu, cleared his throat.
Order! Order! We must organize ourselves. If we're going to welcome summer properly, we need a plan.
A plan, Ma?
Sia asked innocently, flapping its wings.
The ant nodded.
Yes, a coordinated operation.
The plan, Xiao Hashida?
Sia rubbed his legs in excitement. Leo gave Mutia a questioning look.
"Small or big?"
Mutia answered and Leo nodded. The room suddenly became very quiet. Everyone leaned closer.
Operation Giant Panic!
Abu yelled. Cheers exploded throughout the chamber. Outside, the insect kingdom sprang into motion. The ants formed marching columns stretching across the garden. The flies gathered into buzzing squadrons. Mosquitoes zipped through the air like tiny fighter pilots. Spiders packed silk supplies. Ladybugs climbed aboard leaves that served as wagons. Even a slow-moving caterpillar insisted on joining.
"You know she's afraid of us too?"
He asked.
No.
Sia replied.
"Well, she should be. Look at me."
Everyone stared.
You're a fuzzy noodle.
The caterpillar sighed.
That's what my mom says. Though she says a cute, fuzzy, huggable noodle.
The procession continued. From an insect's perspective, it looked like a great migration. Thousands emerged from flower beds, bushes, drains, fences, tree trunks, and hidden burrows. Bees flew overhead, providing aerial reconnaissance. Dragonflies zoomed back and forth, delivering messages. A pair of grasshoppers bounced ahead as scouts.
Target house in sight,
one reported. The crowd gasped. There it stood, Naya's house. To humans, it was a normal suburban home. To the insects, it looked like a gigantic castle. Its walls towered into the sky. Its windows shone like enormous mirrors. Its front door was as tall as a mountain.
Beautiful.
whispered a spider.
Terrifying, whispered a moth.
Home, sweet summer, said Sia.
Inside the house, Nia was enjoying the first day of vacation. The windows were open. A warm breeze drifted through the rooms. She stretched out on the couch.
This summer is going to be great.
She said. A shadow appeared near the window, then another, and another. Outside, the insect army had arrived. Sia landed on the windowsill. Behind him came hundreds of flies. Ants advanced through cracks in the foundation. Ladybugs occupied flower pots. Spiders took strategic positions beneath eaves and porch railings. Mosquitoes hovered in formation. Then Abu stepped forward dramatically.
Insects of the neighborhood.
He started. The crowd cheered.
Our annual summer visit begins now.
More cheering.
For months we have waited.
Hooray!
For months we have planned.
Hooray!
And now,
The ant pointed toward the giant house.
we remind Nia that no matter how big she is,
The insects leaned forward.
she is still afraid of things smaller than her thumb.
The crowd erupted.
Tania! Tania! Tania!
The great insect migration surged forward. Flies zipped through open windows. Ants marched under doors. Spiders climbed walls. Ladybugs explored curtains. A single beetle dramatically kicked open absolutely nothing because doors were far too heavy.
Charge!
He shouted anyway. A few moments later, a scream echoed through the house. Spider! Nia sprinted across the living room. The spider looked offended.
I just got here.
Another scream followed.
A fly!
Sia proudly bowed.
Thank you, thank you.
Then came a third.
Why are there so many of you?
The insects looked at one another. Abu smiled,
Because summer is here.
and throughout the house, from floorboards to ceiling corners, the annual festival of terrifying Nia had officially begun. As Nia knelt to pray that night, she could still feel the frustration from not being able to overcome the fears of bugs. She knew God hadn't given her the spirit of fear, but she didn't know how not to be afraid. She could hear her mum's voice telling her that she had it in her to overcome the fear, that she was bigger and stronger and had nothing to be afraid of. But for so long she had shown her fears and were ruled by them while also be taken for granted by the pesky bugs. So she prayed a simple prayer, Lord, teach me how not to be afraid. Show me how to be bold and strong. So every day she told herself she was strong because God lived inside of her. She went through her day chanting that she was bold, stronger, and courageous. Every morning before she started her chores, Nia would stand in front of her mirror, straighten her shoulders, and speak aloud.
I am strong.
She would take a deep breath,
I am bold.
another breath.
I am courageous.
Then with even more confidence she would say,
God is with me. I do not need to be afraid.
At first the insects paid little attention. After all, every summer began with Nia making promises to herself before running from the first spider she spotted. But this year felt different. Day after day she repeated those words, while watering flowers, I am strong. While carrying heavy boxes, I am bold. While pulling weeds, I am courageous. The insects heard everything, and to their surprise, Nia seemed different. She walked taller. She moved with more confidence. She spent longer periods in the garden without constantly looking over her shoulder. She even paused one day when a ladybug landed on her sleeve. Instead of screaming, she calmly brushed it onto a leaf. The ladybug nearly fainted, while the onlooking bugs gasped in disbelief. That evening, an emergency meeting was called beneath the garden shed. The atmosphere was tense. No one was laughing. No one was joking. The insects sat in nervous clusters, while Sia the fly paced back and forth.
This is serious.
He announced.
How serious?
Asked Leo.
Extremely serious.
A mosquito raised a tiny hand.
Are we talking bird serious or lawnmower serious?
Worse.
The room gasped.
Worse than lawnmowers?
Fei Chang.
Sia nodded gravely.
Extremely.
An uneasy silence settled over the gathering. Finally, Mutia spoke.
Let's review the evidence.
He pulled out a rolled-up flower petal covered in notes.
3 days ago, Nia saw a caterpillar and only stepped back twice.
The crowd murmured nervously.
Yesterday, she removed a spider web from her porch without screaming.
Several spiders looked personally offended.
And this morning,
Mutia paused dramatically.
a bee landed near her watering can.
Everyone leaned forward.
What happened?
Whispered Leo.
She didn't run.
The room exploded into panic. What? No. Impossible. Has she developed immunity? One spider clutched his head.
We're doomed.
Abu climbed onto a pebble and raised his hands.
Order!
He commanded. The insects gradually quieted.
We must remain calm.
Calm?
Cried Sia.
She's becoming fearless.
Leo added. Abu nodded.
That is indeed concerning.
Leo tilted his head.
What do you think is happening?
Abu stroked his antenna thoughtfully.
I've been listening to her.
Everyone turned toward him. You have?
Every day.
And?
She keeps saying the same things.
Abu cleared his throat and imitated Nia's voice.
I am strong. I am bold. I am courageous. God is with me.
The insects exchanged worried glances.
I don't like the sound of that.
Said a mosquito.
Neither do I.
Admitted Sia.
It sounds powerful.
Abu nodded.
Exactly.
A young beetle raised a hand.
But she's always been strong.
True.
Abu replied.
And she's always been big.
Also true.
And she carries things none of us could ever move.
Abu smiled.
You're beginning to understand.
The room grew quiet.
Perhaps.
Abu continued.
The problem was never her size.
The insects listened carefully.
Perhaps she simply forgot how strong she already was.
For a moment nobody spoke. Then a tiny spider swallowed nervously.
So, what happens if she remembers?
The room became silent again. Outside, the evening breeze rustled through the garden. Abu looked toward Nia's house, where a light glowed in an upstairs window.
If she truly believes those words,
He said softly.
then she may stop seeing herself as prey.
The insects shuddered, because they all remembered something Nia seemed to forget. She was enormous. She could move mountains from their perspective. She could uproot entire forests, which humans called weeds, with a single tug. She could carry stones larger than houses. She could reshape whole sections of the garden in an afternoon. The bugs had always known this. Their advantage had never been strength. Their advantage had always been fear, and now that advantage seemed to be slipping away. Sia looked toward the house. At that very moment, Nia stepped into her garden carrying a watering can. She moved confidently among the flowers. A spider lowered itself from a branch nearby. Nia noticed it. The insects held their breath. She froze for a moment. The old fear flashed across her face. Then she whispered something to herself. The bugs couldn't quite hear it. She took a deep breath, straightened her shoulders, and calmly walked past the spider. The spider nearly fell off its thread. Back beneath the shed, panic erupted once more. Abu sighed.
Friends,
The insects turned toward him.
I think we may have a problem.
And for the first time in many summers, the bugs began to wonder whether the fearful giant Nia was slowly becoming the brave giant she was always meant to be. The emergency meeting ended in complete disorder. The insects spilled out from beneath the shed, each one talking over the others. This is bad. Very bad. She's changing. I preferred the screaming version. She looked right at a spider and kept walking. That is not normal behavior. Soon the panic spread beyond the meeting. Word traveled through the garden faster than a breeze. The aphids heard, the beetles heard, the moths heard, even the worms underground heard rumors of Nia's growing courage. Within days, a strange sight could be seen around Nia's house. The insects were retreating, not all at once, not dramatically, just a little farther away each day. The flies stopped gathering around the kitchen window. The spiders relocated their webs to the far end of the fence. The ants moved several trails away from the porch. Ladybugs abandoned their favorite rose bush near the back door. The garden that had once served as the headquarters for Operation Giant Panic was slowly becoming a buffer zone. One morning, Sia noticed it first.
Is it just me?
He asked.
Or is everyone moving away?
Leo looked around. The flower bed closest to the house was nearly empty. The porch railings no longer had clusters of spiders hanging beneath them. Even the mosquitoes had shifted their patrol routes.
Oh no,
Leo said.
we are moving away.
Exactly.
Abu sighed.
Fear.
What?
That is what is happening.
The insects stared at him.
When Nia was afraid of us, everyone wanted to be close to her house.
Abu pointed toward the porch.
Now that she's becoming less afraid, everyone is keeping their distance.
The insects looked around nervously. Nobody could argue. That was exactly what was happening. Meanwhile, Nia was having one of the best summers she could remember. She still didn't like bugs, not at all, but every day she practiced courage. Every day she reminded herself that fear didn't have to control her. So she worked in the garden, pulled weeds, trimmed bushes, watered flowers, and whenever she felt nervous, she repeated her familiar words.
I am strong.
Snip,
I am bold.
water splash,
I am courageous.
pull.
God is with me.
The insects watched from farther and farther away.
She keeps saying those words.
Whispered a beetle.
I know.
And she keeps getting bigger. She's not actually getting bigger.
Then explain why she feels bigger. Nobody had an answer. One sunny afternoon, Nia was happily working among the flowers. A song drifted through the garden as she worked. She wasn't much of a singer, but that had never stopped her. Strong and brave and not afraid. She watered a row of flowers. Strong and brave and not afraid. Nearby, several insects observed from what they believed was a safe distance. Sia sat on a leaf. Leo perched on a rose. Mutia hovered above a flower.
See?
Said Sia.
She looks different.
Before anyone could respond, a small fly named Zuri zipped excitedly into the air.
She's not that scary.
Zuri announced daringly. The others gasped.
Zuri, what are you doing?
I'm proving we're overreacting. Zuri answered boldly.
Zuri, come back!
But Zuri was already buzzing toward Nia. He circled once, twice, then flew directly in front of her face. Nia blinked.
Oh,
Zuri laughed victoriously.
See? Nothing happened.
He darted closer and Nia instinctively waved a hand. Zuri dodged. The insects watched nervously.
Abort mission!
Advised Mutia.
Definitely abort mission.
Sia supported, but Zuri was having too much fun. He looped around Nia's head, buzzed near one ear then the other. Nia tried ignoring him.
strong and brave and not afraid.
Buzz.
Strong and brave and not afraid.
Buzz. Finally she sighed. Without even looking, she swatted the air. Smack! Zuri disappeared. The entire garden froze. Every insect stopped moving. A leaf drifted slowly to the ground. Nobody spoke. Zuri tumbled into a nearby daisy, dazed, spinning, seeing approximately 7 gardens instead of 1. After several seconds, he climbed back to his feet.
I think
He staggered sideways.
I saw next summer.
The insects rushed over.
Zuri?
Are you alive?
I think so.
How many wings am I holding up?
Sia asked.
You only have 2.
Good answer.
The crowd collectively exhaled. Across the garden, Nia remained completely unaware of the drama. She simply continued working, humming, pulling weeds, watering flowers. occasionally brushing insects away without fear or panic. The bugs watched her in stunned silence. Finally, Sia spoke.
Did she even notice?
Zuri shook his head.
No.
The realization hit them all at once. When Nia had been afraid, every bug had felt powerful. But now she wasn't chasing them. She wasn't screaming. She wasn't running. She was simply living her life. And somehow that was far more intimidating. Abu looked toward the giant figure singing among the flowers. Then he looked at the insects gathered around him.
Well,
He said,
it appears the giant has stopped fighting shadows.
The bugs followed his gaze. Nia laughed at something she was thinking about, lifted a heavy pot with ease, and carried it across the garden while continuing her song. The insects quietly took another few steps backward, just to be safe. Slowly but surely, the change became impossible to ignore. The insects had spent years believing that Nia would always run, always scream, always abandon whatever she was doing the moment one of them appeared. But summer has a way of revealing whether change is real. And this summer was revealing a new Nia. At first, it was the small things. When a spider appeared on the shed wall, she paused, took a breath, and walked past it. When a beetle crossed the garden path, she stepped around it instead of turning back. When a fly buzzed near her ear, she no longer flailed wildly and sprinted indoors. The old fear still whispered to her. She still felt her stomach tighten. She still preferred bugs to stay very far away. But she had discovered something important. Courage was not the absence of fear. It was choosing not to let fear decide what happened next. And every day she made that choice.
I am strong.
She watered flowers.
I am bold.
She pulled weeds.
I am courageous.
She walked through the garden.
God is with me.
She kept moving forward. The insects watched nervously as the fearful giant they knew began to disappear. Then came the day of the fly swatter. Sia still remembered it vividly. The flies had gathered near the kitchen window, assuming old habits would return. After all, this was their traditional summer territory, a place of honor, a place of victory, a place where generations of flies had annoyed Nia and people like Nia. Then the kitchen door opened. Nia stepped outside. In her hand was a bright green fly swatter. The flies exchanged worried looks.
Why is she carrying that?
Whispered one,
Maybe decoration?
suggested another. Sia wasn't convinced. Nia spotted the buzzing cloud. The flies prepared for the usual reaction, a scream, a retreat, perhaps some frantic running. Instead, Nia smiled.
Oh no.
Sia whispered. The fly swatter lifted. Swish! The entire formation scattered. Flies shot in every direction. One crashed into a flower pot. Another flew directly into a leaf. Sia barely escaped. From that day forward, the fly swatter became a symbol of terror among the insect community. The spiders faced their own challenges. One afternoon, a spider named Weber carefully constructed an elaborate masterpiece across the garden gate. Hours of work, perfect symmetry, beautiful craftsmanship, a true work of art. The next morning, Nia approached. Weber waited for the familiar scream. Instead, she simply picked up a broom.
Wait!
He said.
No.
The broom moved. The web vanished. Weber clung to a nearby branch in shock.
My architecture.
Nia continued walking, completely unbothered. The ants suffered setbacks as well. Their marching routes near the porch became increasingly difficult. Nia discovered their trails and redirected them away from the house with careful cleaning and barriers. Nothing cruel, nothing excessive, just a firm message, not here. The ants reluctantly relocated, again and then again. By midsummer, the insects held another emergency meeting. Attendance was lower than usual. Many had already moved to neighboring gardens. The mood was gloomy. Sia stood before the gathering.
What happened to us?
Nobody answered. Abu stepped forward.
I'll tell you what happened.
The room became quiet.
We spent years believing Nia was weak because she was afraid.
The insects listened carefully.
but she was never weak.
The old ant looked toward the distant house.
She was always strong.
The crowd turned to follow his gaze.
She carried things heavier than any of us could imagine.
True.
She protected others.
True.
She worked harder than anyone.
True.
Abu nodded.
The only thing she needed to conquer was her fear.
Silence filled the meeting place, because everyone knew he was right. As summer drew to a close, the great attacks stopped. No more organized invasions, no more Operation Giant Panic, no more annual campaigns of terror. The insects still lived in the garden, the spiders still spun webs, the flies still buzzed, the beetles still wandered. Nature continued as it always had, but something fundamental had changed. Mia no longer saw herself as helpless whenever a bug appeared. She no longer imagined herself as prey. She no longer surrendered her peace because of something small. One warm evening she sat on her porch watching the sunset. A ladybug landed on the railing nearby. Mia noticed it. The ladybug froze, waiting, watching, hoping for panic, hoping for chaos. Instead, Mia simply smiled.
Hello there!
The ladybug blinked. Mia remained seated, calm, peaceful, and unafraid. The ladybug eventually flew away, not because it had won, not because Mia had lost, but because neither had anything to prove anymore. Across the garden, Abu observed the moment. He smiled and shook his head.
The giant finally remembered who she was.
And that summer ended unlike any summer before it. Mia still didn't love bugs. She still preferred them outdoors. She still kept a fly swatter nearby and defended her home whenever she needed to, but fear no longer ruled her. The bugs had spent years trying to convince a giant that she was small. At last she stopped believing them. And with that, the reign of the summer terrors came to an end.